conqueror would not be denied his throne, even by death itself. This video shows the story of Sahn-Uzal, the tyrant who became a god, a warlord, who returned as Mordekaiser.
Fight, flee, it will make no difference.
The origins of Noxus begins here, and it actually reveals a lot and gives us our first shot of the Death Realm. Although I don't think this is the Death Realm, or at least not the Death Realm that Sahn-Uzal was supposed to go to. There's a color story that came out with this cinematic called The Final Reign, and it gives us insight into the Immortal Bastion and the end of this cinematic, so we'll talk about that as well. Let's go through the cinematic. Keep in mind, we're going to be stopping and starting pretty much the whole way through, so if you haven't seen the cinematic, click the first link in the description below, watch that, then come back here and we'll run it out together.
I am Sahn-Uzal, unconquered king of the Noxii.
Many people don't know this, Noxus was not always referred to as Noxus. During this time, it was just a bunch of tribes referred to as the Noxii, and Sahn-Uzal conquers all of it. We can see this guy riding a basilisk, and these are creatures native to Noxus even today and are used as mounts. We can see this character is kind of the leader of the group.
King of the Noxii, tyrant of the great grass ocean, follower of the first truth.
Tyrant of the Great Grass Ocean, I believe, is just referring to the grass plains to the west and south of Noxus, as to the east is literal ocean. Maybe a bit of the north, but not too far since you start getting into the Freljord, and he conquered all of this land. This group is traveling through the plains of the Grass Ocean, and then we see Sahn-Uzal on this mound looking down at them.
Follower of the first truth. The strong eat, while the weak have no offerings for their gods.
They attack and we get this one shot. Now I think the snake attacking this tiger, it's supposed to be representative of Sahn-Uzal being the snake, the tiger being this other leader on his mount, and Sahn-Uzal pretty much knocks him off his mount in one hit. And that's kind of representative of that snake in the shot before.
The strong eat, while the weak have no offerings for their gods. No hope for eternal glory in the Hall of Bones.
Now this is important. This is his first truth, that the strong eat while the weak have no offerings to their gods. No hope for eternal glory in the Hall of Bones. And we're zooming up to what? The Immortal Bastion. Now we do know from the color story that there are priests who are telling Sahn-Uzal about the Hall of Bones, the afterlife, and probably the god as well. So what does the Immortal Bastion have to do with this god? It seems like he really believes it, that he'll receive this eternal glory in the Hall of Bones if he's able to conquer all of these grass plains and all of this land in Noxus.
While the weak have no offerings for their gods.
He says the weak have no offerings for their gods. So by him doing this, by him conquering all of these lands, they are also acting as offerings for his gods or god. Whatever this god is, it has a lot to do with the Immortal Bastion. And we see this red glow emanating from the Immortal Bastion, which we've seen also in the Bite Mark cinematic, that same orange glow. And remember, Mel's an empath.
An empath, attuned to the ethereal, able to sense others' inner selves and bend their magic. A conduit and a mirror.
So she's seeing through the Immortal Bastion the power that's like actually coming from it, that's actually emanating from it. It doesn't look like that to everyone else. It only looks like that to Mel. And then now we're seeing that same power right here in front of Sahn-Uzal coming from the Immortal Bastion. And what's in the Immortal Bastion? What's the most powerful thing we know of that has ever been in the Immortal Bastion according to the current lore? It could be something else, but right now the most powerful thing to ever be within the Immortal Bastion is Rom, the Demon of Secrets. And Rom is a demon, and demons get more powerful by consuming what represents them, in Rom's case, secrets. And the way Rom loves to do this in the lore currently is via battlefield. He's able to go into a battlefield in the aftermath and consume the secrets from the dying and deceased. We see this almost happen to Swain in Ionia. A raven comes to him, and that's when he discovers that something dark is within the Immortal Bastion, and he goes back to discover it and then ends up fusing with Rom. And that's how you get Swain, the character in current lore today. So what I think is happening here is that this god that Sahn-Uzal is referring to, that he has sacrifices for, right, because he's not weak, is Rom. And Rom maybe is manipulating Sahn-Uzal into going out and conquering all these lands, causing war and chaos. And Rom is using that chaos and those wars and those battlefields to gain more power, to steal more secrets. And the way he's manipulating Sahn-Uzal is by promising him this Hall of Bones in the afterlife. If he's able to conquer all these people and conquer all these lands, he'll find glory in the world beyond.
While the weak have no offerings for their gods. No hope for eternal glory in the Hall of Bones. For them, a reckoning awaited. So I darkened the skies with the ashes of the unworthy, and built a kingdom upon sacrifice and blood.
And that he believed that he would be the ruler of the afterlife if he was able to sacrifice enough souls to the afterworld. So he darkened the skies with ashes of the unworthy.
And built a kingdom upon sacrifice and blood.
Before we zoom into this tent, look right behind it. This is almost the first iteration of the Immortal Bastion. The way we can always know whether something is representative of the Immortal Bastion or not is this gap in between. It's almost like two jutting towers with smaller buildings at its side, but there's always a gap between them. It seems like if we go back to when Sahn-Uzal is just around this campfire, again, there's no red glow around him at this point, but he's looking out at behind the tents, and it looks almost like a spiritual representation of the Immortal Bastion. The Immortal Bastion that we see in present day with the metal, and it's very close to what we see currently, but it's almost clear, almost see-through. So I don't think he's actually seeing the Immortal Bastion, this building behind him. He's almost something showing it to him. He's seeing what the end goal of whatever this god is, what it wants him to build, what the end should look like. So something is telling him to build this Immortal Bastion. In my opinion, that's what I think is really happening. Something showing him the future. Either that or this is his vision of the future, of what he thinks the towering structure should look like once it's done. Because then here we're seeing, I think, what it is. This isn't clear. This looks like a physical structure, and it just almost looks like some rocks. It's very archaic, not super metal, not sharp edges. It's just some rocks stacked together, but you still get that gap. So I think this is the first iteration of the Immortal Bastion, what it'll look like later. Because Mordekaiser really builds out the Immortal Bastion in his second life, but it looks like he was kind of working on it or getting started on it in his first life. Because if you don't know this, Mordekaiser has 2 lives. He ends up dying the first time here, wakes up in the afterlife. We'll go through it now, but he does have a second life, and that's when he really builds up the Mortal Bastion. And this is the first structure of it. This is the real structure and not just a vision of it or something showing him what it should look like. One last thing, I know these are supposed to be people falling, but when it's spinning around Sahn-Uzal and they blur, it does look a little bit like ravens. And with the red, honestly, I'm just seeing ROM everywhere at this point. I could just be seeing things, but it does look a little bit like ravens when it's spinning around Sahn-Uzal.
And built a kingdom upon sacrifice and blood. In time.
And then look right here, when you're zooming in on Sahn-Uzal, he's sitting up there, and you see almost like a much simpler representation of the Noxus logo above him. Here, this red logo above where he's sitting, it's a little dark, but you can make it out. And I think that's like an old representation of the Noxus logo, what it was originally before it became what it is today. It's been changed significantly, but the shape is still there. And what's important is this shape, the shape on Mordekaiser's helmet, which you can see it's starting to take form at this point. The shape of the Immortal Bastion itself is these 2 jetting structures with the gap in between them. Even if you look at the original Noxus logo, which is what I think this is, and the current one we have today, all are emulating this same design. There's definitely more to it than just some random design choice that Sahn-Uzal made when building the Immortal Bastion. I think it was shown to him.
While the weak have no offerings for their gods.
And we're zooming in on Sahn-Uzal, and if you look close, and remember Atakan, if you watch the Bringer of Ruin comic, Atakan is a demon that merged with Katashli, and you can see this red glow emanating from him. Now look at Sahn-Uzal. We haven't seen this red glow emanating from Sahn-Uzal before this. Somehow there's a red glow coming from him at this point, and all these yellow eyes around him. Now I'm not sure what this could mean. Does it mean that there's some kind of demonic entity that's merged a little bit with Sahn-Uzal as well? Possible, but for some reason they didn't show this red glow prior to this point, and then all of a sudden now there's this red glow coming off of Sahn-Uzal. Maybe whatever demon was inside of that Mortal Bastion, I think it's Ram, has begun fusing in some way to Sahn-Uzal, and we see all these yellow eyes around him. These yellow eyes aren't like the eyes in front. The eyes in front are either looking at us or they're looking at Sahn-Uzal and kneeling at him in respect. The yellow eyes are almost from behind him, looking at him and looking at the people around. They're observing. It seems like almost they're in control as well, just as much as Sahn-Uzal is. And they're sitting behind him, essentially on the throne along with Sahn-Uzal. I thought that was really weird. And then at his crown, you could see it almost looks like the Immortal Bastion again on his helm where this red glow is appearing.
In time, I left the husk of mortality behind and prepared to learn the final truth.
And then look, there's more of these yellow eyes. The whole time we've been kind of looking down at everything. We've been looking down at everyone. We start off on this mound. Sahn-Uzal is looking down at these people. Even here, when we're zooming in, everyone is kneeling around us, right? We're kind of, it feels like we're in power. We're in control the whole time. Until right here. Now all of a sudden we're really low. We've kept getting lower and lower to the ground. We start off very, very high. We're watching from above. Sahn-Uzal's on a mound. We attack these people. Still, even when we're zooming out to the Mortal Bastion, we're looking up above Sahn-Uzal, and we're zooming up, and the Mortal Bastion doesn't even look that big here. And then we're looking down at this battlefield, and I feel like we keep getting lower and lower to the ground. We zoom into this tent. We're a little bit lower, but everyone's kneeling around us, and all of a sudden here we're pretty much on the ground. Like you could see the grass petals around us, and these yellow-eyed beings, whatever they are looking down at us. I'm not sure. I do remember a yellow-eyed raven in Arcane. Maybe that has to do with these characters. I'm not really sure. There is some people that say, oh, that was just a representation for Jinx's sanity or something like that. The red-eyed raven is definitely Rom. The yellow-eyed raven could have something to do with these, but I'm not. Either way, these are looking down at us and in from a position of power, right? We're like almost powerless at this point. We're literally on the ground, and these things are looking down at us. Now we have seen this style of helmet of these yellow-eyed people that are looking down at us in the Bringer of Ruin comic. They're the ones that use some kind of magic to fuse Arcane with Katashli. So they already have some kind of demonic ties to them. Perhaps these people aren't really serving Sahn-Uzal as much as they're serving the demon. The one who's represented almost by this logo of two jutting structures with the gap in between. The logo that's all over Noxus and Mordekaiser. The logo that starts to appear on Sahn-Uzal when we start seeing this red glow at the top of his head.
I left the husk of mortality behind and prepared to learn the final truth. But there were no gods. No Hall of Bones. No eternal glory.
Okay, so now I'm gonna stretch a little bit. Just hear me out. What if this isn't where Sahn-Uzal is supposed to go? What if this isn't actually the death realm? Now look at what's the first thing that Sahn-Uzal sees when he opens his eyes in this death realm, whatever you want to call it, the Hall of Bones, doesn't matter. This is where he wakes up. He sees this structure again, the one that he's been shown in the material world, the one that he was building. While it looks pretty crude later, when he returns in his second life, he builds it much better out of like metal and exactly what it was envisioned. But this structure he sees over here, it looks almost like hands reaching up and this power shooting out, like coming out of it. What if this is the reverse, like the opposite of the material realm? And whatever being is represented, whether it's the demon Rom or some other demon or something else, whatever is represented by that image of these two structures with the gap in between, it's using that as almost like a conduit to pump souls into this realm, where it disenchants them almost. Like you see these people fading away later, and it takes their power and is using that to siphon its power, their power to him, like their lives, their mortal souls. Maybe they're not supposed to end up here, but they use Sahn-Uzal to build that structure in the material realm that's now being used as almost like a conduit, which is why it only happens to Noxians. Maybe if you built this structure in other areas around Runeterra, they would end up in this place. And this being, which these really do look like hands to me, would be able to siphon those souls and gain more power. So whether it's a demon or something else, we don't know. I think it used Sahn-Uzal both in this life and in the second life when he returns as Mordekaiser to siphon souls to this place. And it's able to gain more power from this. And it's not just the death realm, it's this demon's realm in a sense. If we want to call it a demon. I don't know if it's a demon or not, but let's just refer to it as demon for now. This demon is able to siphon souls from the material realm using the structure of the immortal Bastion like a conduit to send souls here where it's able to consume their essence in a sense. And that's how it's becoming more powerful. And the reason it only happens as Noxus is because that's where the immortal Bastion is. And its goal maybe is to build more immortal Bastions all over Runeterra, siphon more souls here and gain more power. And the reason it falls apart at the end is just because it siphoned the souls in that temporary moment, right? Sahn-Uzal's soul and a couple of these other souls into its realm that you can siphon their power. And these arms reach up every time there's like, people dying, these arms form and siphon the souls into this realm rather than maybe where they're supposed to go, which is a completely different place. Now that could all be wrong. It's just speculation. It just seems too convenient to have it so similar to the structure that Sahn-Uzal was building. It must have been shown to him, and it must be for a reason. I feel like these hands are almost symbolic of whatever this creature is, right? The hands are what's siphoning the souls here, and now the hands are claiming Sahn-Uzal. And this is the lowest we see Sahn-Uzal throughout this cinematic. From the very beginning, he's from a position of power, always looking down at everything, until his death, where we're really low, we're literally on the grass, to now he's almost in a pit, and these hands are reaching out to claim him.
No eternal glory. There was only one truth. I am Sahn-Uzal, the unconquered, and I will forge the kingdom I was denied.
Now in the lore currently, Sahn-Uzal refused to fade. His will, tempered by rage and torment, held him together. Now that could be what's being represented by his fiery red hair, like that's the rage. But I think it's really interesting that back then they showed Arcane right next to Sahn-Uzal on his throne, both with this similar red. Well, it could have something to do with this demon, which is represented by these hands and this symbol with the gap and the two jutting structures. Perhaps it has a little bit of influence on Sahn-Uzal and wants him to return, because if everything that I'm saying is correct, then Sahn-Uzal returning as Mordekaiser, forming the immortal Bastion into like this huge jutting structure with out of metal, like really impressive and difficult to destroy at this point, almost a permanent place on Runeterra. And that acting as even probably a bigger conduit, right, to send even more souls to this place. The story goes that Sahn-Uzal learns the language of Aknun, which is the language of the dead, and whispers across the veil to a coven of sorcerers and convinces them to resurrect him. Now during his second reign, he basically kills a ton of people with the whole goal of sending more souls here to this place. So the entire time these hands are probably reaching up, pumping more souls into this place, empowering it, and then Sahn-Uzal literally, at Mordekaiser at that point, allows himself to die. LeBlanc and Vladimir, who if you know the Bringer Bruin comic, are the ones that stopped him in his second reign. That wasn't a victory for them. He wanted them to send him back to this realm so that he can rule over all the souls that he sent here. And it's foreshadowing all of that with the end here, where Sahn-Uzal is pulling in this red energy from this realm, and you could see behind him the face of Mordekaiser with, again, this symbol on his head. Like Mordekaiser's literal helmet is this symbol.
I am Sahn-Uzal, the unconquered, and I will forge the kingdom I was denied.
Now the color story, the final reign, does add a little bit of context to these moments. They're definitely a little bit more elongated than what's shown in the cinematic. It's more spread out. But while he's wandering through this death realm, we learn that the name of it is Mitna Raknun. He wonders to himself, had the priests lied, or were they false prophets peddling fools proclaiming hollow superstitions? So these priests that we saw with the yellow eyes were telling him this stuff about this death realm and where he'd go and the Hall of Bones and the glory that he would receive. And when he doesn't get it, what we're seeing at the end of this is him forging his own fortress where he reigns supreme. And he gathers all this knowledge of the spirits and death magic, crushing all in opposition to him, including a desperate mage who's trying to stop him from obtaining the Tome of Spirits. And that's another reason that points to this not being the actual death realm, since he can kill people in it. It's kind of weird if you can kill a spirit in the death realm, you're already dead. But his dominion is absolute. He commands legions of souls with unyielding authority. Once he's conquered the realm, he realizes his true conquest is not just the afterlife, but the mortal realm as well. And with his power at its peak, he prepares to return to the world of the living, and that's where you get the language of Aknun, the death language that he whispers across the veil. Now I'm quoting here, when he's talking about the Tome of Spirit, it's towards the relic that ties Mitna Raknun to the mortal realm, towards the place that gives the secret heart of the immortal Bastion its true purpose. And in Swain's lore, this is after the war in Ionia, Swain set out about uncovering what truly lay within the immortal Bastion, an ancient entity preying upon the dying and consuming their secrets as it had attempted to consume his own. That's what makes me think that these things are together. Swain is looking at what truly lay within the mortal Bastion that ends up being Rom. Now in this new color story for Mordekaiser, it says, toward the relic that ties Mitna Raknun to the mortal realm, toward the place that gives the secret heart of the immortal Bastion its true purpose. So the immortal Bastion is tying the mortal realm to Mitna Raknun, and it's that the heart that has this secret purpose in the immortal Bastion. And Swain was looking at what truly lay within the mortal Bastion, an ancient entity preying upon the dying, consuming their secrets, which is Rom. Now something that's interesting about Rom is that he might not even be the demon of secrets. What if he is the demon of deception? One thing that's really interesting is Neela, who's kind of in a similar position to Swain, she also fused with the demon. If you want to learn more about her, I have a whole video that just came out covering all the demons of Runeterra. But when she meets Swain, who also fused with a demon, she tells him,
"We are not alike, Jericho Swain. I know the price I paid."
implying that Swain doesn't know the price he paid. So maybe he was deceived by Rom. And maybe Rom is the demon of deception, not secrets. And he also deceived Sahn-Uzal. And maybe Mitna Raklun is not the death realm, it's Rom's realm. And he's sending souls there to gain more power. Yeah, the story of Mordekaiser is awesome. But what are your thoughts? What do you think about the Sahn-Uzal Mordekaiser skin? The origins of Noxus? So far, Noxus has been getting a lot of love. I'd be very surprised if we don't get some kind of Arcane-like series going to Noxus next, just because of how much Noxus' story has been getting fleshed out recently, especially when they teased Rom at the end of Arcane Season 2. But yeah, Sahn-Uzal is one of my favorite characters. It's a great cinematic. And in the next video on this channel, we're going to be covering a threat just as big as Mordekaiser in Runeterra, the Lavender Sea, deep under the shifting sands of Shurima. If you like this video, give it a like, subscribe for future Runeterra lore videos. Massive shout out to those who joined the channel. It really does mean the world to me. Thanks for stopping by the Grove, and I will see you in the next one.